Welcome to this weekend's edition of Fresh Off the Boat. Today, we're delighted to have Pranati Arora volunteer to very improv sort of uh, kind of do this with us. Pranati graduated from Vasant Valley School and then went to Emory University in Atlanta. So, our first question to you, Pranati, after graduating and now working for 2 years at Invest India, what do you think your life would have been if you did not go to Emory? Or rather, what did you gain from the experience at Emory?
So that's actually a really interesting question, and it's a conversation I've had a bunch over the last 2.5 years, and the 4 years prior. Because when I was applying in 2014, I actually had a choice between NYU and Emory, and those are both really really good schools, and everybody recognized it. I was excited about both, to be honest, but in my mind I think the scale was kind of tipped towards NYU. I was excited about being a New Yorker, being in New York with the environment and that entire ecosystem around you. But when I started talking to people, professionals, consultants, my classmates, there was one thing that kind of really struck out in most conversations, which was the fact that Emory is ultimately a campus and New York is a city. So when you go to NYU, you'll be in a city, you won't be in a campus necessarily. Whereas in Emory, you'll just be on a campus, being able to learn in a liberal arts environment. So I think that understanding and what it meant for spending 4 years on a campus setting as opposed to a city setting, just understanding the difference between that kind of enabled a choice towards Emory. So now that I look back at it retrospectively, if I would have gone to say a New York or any other university at that point, I think honestly it would have looked very very different. I do think that opportunities presented to me would have been very different. Maybe I would have been on a different career path altogether. But I can say hand on heart that the amount of opportunities Emory was able to give me with regards to on-campus presence, leadership roles, extracurricular activities, sports or debate or Model UN. All of that, I don't think any other campus would have been able to give me, and definitely not a school that's based in a city. So I think I'm really grateful for those opportunities that
Well
a
said.
campus
Yeah, I
setting
think that's
gives them.
pretty interesting because when I look at your resume, it seems that you've harnessed opportunities to learn new things, do different things. And how did that journey happen, especially in the academics, thinking of political science, mathematics, and even doing a minor in economics? Was it all decided from day one?
No, no, no. It definitely wasn't decided. I was, in fact, going in as an economics student because I thoroughly enjoyed that at Vasant Valley. I had the best teacher, Mrs. Chiv. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she was the economics teacher at Vasant Valley at the time, and she made almost everybody fall in love with the subject. So I was, under the impression that I'm going to be an economics graduate, and that's decided. But when I went to Emory, I took the Econ 101 class, I took the Math 101 class, Calc 101, and I took a Political Science 110, which is like, all introductory courses. And, at that point, sitting in those introductory courses, it kind of became clear to me that economics is much bigger than all of us, think it to be in high school. So I was strongly drawn towards the combination of political science and mathematics. And fortunately for me, I think Emory is one of the only colleges in the US that offers this joint degree where you're allowed to do both mathematics and political science. In fact, the year that I was a sophomore, my second year in college, they introduced this other um, bachelor's in sciences by the name of quantitative studies. So my counselor, in fact, approached me and she said, look, we think you'll be the ideal candidate. Why don't you give quantitative studies a look as well? And when I looked at the curriculum for that, it was very computer science heavy. I knew I wanted to do math and I knew I wanted to do political science, but I wasn't sure about computer science at all. So at that point, I decided to forego that opportunity and focus more on the theoretical aspect of political science as well as the theory of math and see how they both align. I was in fact among one of 8 students on campus that was doing that joint degree. So I think it definitely gave me an edge above the rest, edge above the political science students as well as an edge above the pure math students. And I till date believe that that is the reason I was able to work with the UN for a bit. I think the math definitely set me apart with the UN application as
Super
well.
interesting. So the link between, say, data science, mathematics, and political science. Uh,
Yeah,
for uh, for our listeners who are in high school or currently just starting college, this could be useful information.
definitely.
What are the different applications and kind of job prospects for a major like this? I know UNDP was your first experience of working there on a project. Tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think with regards to career opportunities and that question, I think that's something I'm also in the process of figuring out. It's an interesting journey. I would definitely advocate for it anywhere, but it's still a process that I'm in the middle of. Um, but I think, what I think the underlying theme to all subjects, I think in today's day and age where we're so dependent on technology, the underlying theme is technology. So whether you look at marketing, you look at branding, these are the obvious suspects with regards to data. So you understand consumer data and you understand how you want to target your consumers. But the same can be true for policies as well and for politicians, in fact. So, there are a host of different organizations that are working exclusively with data and data mapping to figure out how to, increase political efficiency, political reach out. And that's something that I think will be big in the future because now even in the Indian ecosystem, politicians, parties, bureaucrats have been able to understand that without data, you don't have a foot on the ground. Because of how big an ecosystem India is, you need those data tools at your disposal in order to ensure you can reach your audience. Without the data on hand, you really can't reach your audience. So I think that's something that political scientists and policymakers are also trying to leverage now. And speaking specifically for my UN experience, UN is of course, we have the government of India and then you have the UN, which is looking at multiple governments across geographies. So for them, it becomes even more important to have those data tools at their disposal. So I think my primary responsibility with the UN project was to ensure that the projects that the UN is taking on an active basis are seeing result, to kind of figuring out whether those results are targeted towards the UN's end goal or whether those programs are really, causeless, so to say, or resultless.
It makes policy action measurable in,
Exactly, exactly,
even in, say, corporate life. You have OKRs, objectives, and then you
exactly.
measure key results in
Yeah.
qualitative and quantitative ways. So that's interesting. So after that experience at UNDP, was this located in Thailand, or was this a remote sort of
So I was
job?
actually in Bangkok for 6 months. I think it was by far one of the greatest life experiences I've ever had because Bangkok is in fact the APAC headquarters. So it's a large campus with thousands of people bustling in and out, and it's kind of very much similar to a college campus setting. I was very fortunate that way that I went from a little Emory bubble to a little UN bubble. So I was really, really fortunate that way where, I had people from all parts of the world, countries I hadn't even heard of. My colleague was in fact from Malawi. I don't know if this says a lot about me or about the fact that, the work that the UN is doing, but I didn't even know Malawi was, a proper country at that point. So I think it definitely, increased my understanding of the scope of work that can be done at the international level. And yeah, Bangkok was a great experience.
And then moving forward, when you came back to India, looking at options, there could be plenty because there's also a whole thriving consulting practice, which many organizations run for political data.
Mhm.
Uh, Instead of choosing that, you chose to work with an organization which government run, Invest India. So
Mhm.
tell us about that decision and what do you really do there?
Sure. So with Invest India, that's one of my responses when people ask me, how come you didn't decide to? Because I was mathematics and political science, got a STEM qualification my second year there, so I would have technically had those 2 extra years on my visa. So a lot of time when people ask me, why did you not choose to stay there? You had the 2 year extension; it would have been ideal for you. The advantage of coming back to India was that I would get to work with the government and get to work with the decision makers. That's an opportunity I'm not entirely sure I would have had in the US. One is that, second is also working with a developing economy. So, understanding the nuances of policy making in a developed nation are drastically different from understanding those in a developed nation that is already functional. That got its A to Z's mapped out. They know what goes where, who's responsible for what. It's much clearer there. But with the developing nations, there's certain, qualities, there's certain issues that come up that wouldn't come up anywhere else. So I think Invest India definitely helped me leverage those, responsibilities and address some of those issues in a developing world setting. Invest India is the National Investment Promotion and Facilitation Agency. It's directly under the Ministry of Commerce, and it's essentially responsible for all FDI that comes into the country. So we enable and facilitate investors, foreign investors looking to invest into the nation across sectors, across geographies. I specifically look at investors coming from Taiwan or investors coming in the automobile electric mobility space. So working with East Asian countries and working with MNCs that are functional in the automobile sector. So I think that is like a broad undertaking of my work at Invest India. There's obviously been, in terms of services that Invest India offers, it's a broad range. It's a very flexible organization in that it allows you, any project that you set your mind to, you can do as long as you have support from senior management.
So
So it's
have you
kind of
seen the kind of workload increase because of COVID and the whole anti-China wave, so-called anti-China wave that the world is going through?
So yeah, definitely with COVID-19, our workload, in fact, more than increased, it shifted completely. There was a complete pivot in our job responsibility because initially we were helping, just investors looking to come into the country. But now, with the pandemic, what we started doing was we started issue resolution on an active basis for business that are already in the country. So this could be domestic companies, this could be foreign companies. It really didn't matter, and across the nation, so across states and across sectors, of course. So Investindia, in fact, launched this business immunity platform whereby we were able to, gather the issues that companies were facing at the ground level and resolve them in a timely fashion. In fact, one of the timelines that we maintained was, average of 6,000 queries resolved within 6 hours. So that was kind of how the role changed. But like the second aspect of it, of course, was the realignment of the global supply chain that we're now seeing.
Hey, so
Right.
I'll repeat the question again.
So,
So, with the changing times and during this COVID era, do you think India has opportunities, and how is Invest India and maybe your role, has it really increased in the couple of weeks?
sure, definitely. So, with Invest India, because, we're working with the government as a whole is a very flexible agency. So, with rising issues with pandemics that are unprecedented, there's definitely a change in the government's outlook as well, and that kind of transcended to Invest India's role as well. So even though we're the investment promotion agency, our role pivoted very very quickly to becoming an issue resolution agency. So we in fact launched a business immunity platform that directly addressed issues faced by businesses at the ground level. So not just foreign businesses and large MNCs, also domestic businesses that were facing issues at the state level. So working directly with the state governments, collecting, making a roster of the issues, dividing it, analyzing it a little bit to see what could be fixed most promptly and what could perhaps be clubbed into a larger bucket. So in fact, one of the things that the business community platform did was create a subgroup on logistical issues, because a lot of companies were in fact just simply facing blockages in transport, and with the import of raw material and the export factor, there was just companies that weren't able to manage their logistics in a timely fashion. So that's why Invest India was able to intervene and kind of support those requirements. I specifically was working on a smaller group for testing kits. So everybody recognized that testing kits would be the need of the hour, and with a population of 1.3 billion people, you're going to need almost triple of those to ensure that everybody in the country is tested, and you can ensure that the tests are conducted in a appropriate, efficient manner. So something like what South Korea did with those testing cubicles, something like that in India may not be feasible, but you need to prepare for it. So sourcing those testing kits, ensuring that domestic manufacturing for testing kits is also happening. That's where I played a larger role in the organization, and it was a very, very, very interesting experience working directly with decision makers on ground, because at that point it's like all hands on deck. So wherever you can help, you should help.
So is the war zone kind of environment over now? People have relaxed into their jobs, or do you think it's still pretty hectic at
it,
work?
it's still hectic, but I think we're back to our original task of investment promotion and facilitation. And this is why the second part, what you mentioned about like the realignment of the global supply chain, so to say, with a lot of Western countries looking to move resources out of and into other parts of the country, out of
Well,
of the world. Sorry, yeah. So that's what we're busy with now. We're supporting companies that are looking to move into India across the nation. Doesn't matter which state, doesn't matter which sector. But we've seen definitely an increase in interest, and we're hoping that the next 6 months will also be as exciting as the last 3 months have been.
fascinating. I think choosing this job and then being faced by a crisis, it sort of is an experience. So I'm sure you'll probably narrate to your grandchildren going forward.
Yeah,
Maybe.
at the
But
dinner table the other day, and my brother, just casually said, "Yeah, yeah, I'll tell my kids that I designed the vaccine." And my mom looked at me and she's like, you can actually tell your kids that you were working with the government and solving some of the problems at that time. Like, it won't be an absolute exaggeration. So, I mean, yeah.
right. So going forward, what do you think you want to do next?
So I think when I think about I think limit small career, whatever it is, but career progression, I've had the experience of working at an international agency. I've also now had a experience of working with a national government. I'm honestly, as a next job role, looking at something that will drive a little deeper. Working at the grassroots level, not necessarily on policy formulation, but also on policy implementation. So I know, the ins and outs of the programs that can be instituted at the national level or at the state government level. But I really don't know what they look like at the grassroots level. And for that, I'm looking at some fellowships, like annual fellowships now, to see if they would be a better fit for me. But I think also in the short term, what I'm looking at is a master's in public policy or public administration, to really hone some of those quantitative skills that I held on to so strongly at Emory, and also ensure that they continue with my career after a master's.
Sure. So which ones are kind of top of your list?
So I mean, you obviously have your obvious suspects, which are the Harvard, Princeton, Yales of the world. But in addition to that, I'm also looking very strongly at programs that highlight data science with public policy. Fortunately for me, there's not too many of them, so I don't have to do that much research. But I think one of the programs that I'm perhaps most interested in is in Georgetown, which is the Masters in Science for Data Science and Public Policy. Then also at Harvard, there's this public Masters in Public Administration for International Development that also has a very strong quantitative curriculum. So I would be looking at programs that are able to balance both quantitative as well as qualitative learning.
You'll be happy to know this morning I interviewed a SPA student who's done the master's program in Harvard. And
Oh, great.
yeah, in fact, her video is already up. and the
Okay, I've
podcast
been
will
seeing
be
that up.
released soon. Okay, great. So yeah, pretty exciting in terms of your journey, and also knowing that you have some sort of clarity. Many students don't have that, and so your experiences have led to that decision, which is fantastic. Now, if you were to, we'd switch gears and talk about you and get to know you. So quick, rapid fire responses. If you were to pick three adjectives that describe your strengths,
Mhm.
what would those be?
So I think my three strengths would be that I'm hardworking, I'm perseverant, and I think the last thing would be I think my thought process is fairly clear. So if I'm given say a maze, I know how to divide it into three bullet points and think along those lines. So thinking is a little structured, yeah.
Super. Next question would be if you could recall an embarrassing moment or a failure.
So
It could be high school, college, work, and yeah, what would that be? And what reflections do you have from that experience?
okay, so it's not necessarily an embarrassing moment. It's more like an embarrassing semester. But when I was moving out of Vasant Valley and the entire home ecosystem and moving to college, I think one of the things that I recognized that I missed out at Emory, at in Vasant Valley, actually two things. One was extracurricular activities, and one was social life. So I think both of those things I didn't necessarily work towards at Vasant Valley. So when I went to Emory, I decided, you know what, like academics is going to be on the back seat, and I'm going to focus on these two things. So I got involved in everything on campus, and I was out on the town on a weekly basis. And that obviously impacted my GPA a little bit. And that really hit me when December 2015, 2014 came. That really, really hit me. And by January 2014, I was kind of back to the books. So I think that is like one failure or embarrassing story. Yeah.
One final question now is more to do with advice that you would give young people who are in a limbo in a sense because they were supposed to go to college this year, graduating class of 2020 from high schools, including Vasant Valley, and the kids who were supposed to get a great graduation ceremony just
So,
like you did, perhaps, when you graduated from Emory in 2018. What would you sort of have a message for them and sort of console them about dealing with uncertainties?
sure, sure. I'm honestly not the best person at dealing with uncertainty, so take this with a pinch of salt. But my brother, in fact, graduated from UIUC this last week as well, so he's kind of one of those kids in limbo. But I think my honestly my biggest advice would be just trust the process. This is not a problem that you alone are facing. There is a thousand of kids, like thousands of kids across the globe that are facing similar problems that are in the same position that you are in. And if you trust the process, resolution will come. It will happen. Colleges recognize the problem at hand. They realize it's unprecedented. They realize it's never been faced before, and they are adjusting accordingly. So I would recommend you adjust your mindset also accordingly. If your first semester is online, it's not the worst thing in the world. It'll perhaps give you more time to mentally prepare yourself for the academics in the American ecosystem. So yeah, that would be my greatest advice. Like just trust the process.
Super. So with that, thank you, Pranati, and looking forward to following your success in the future. We'll
Thank you.
definitely want to invite you to some of our panels that we've lined up in the coming weeks. So look forward to catching up again
No,
with a group of
definitely.
other students who could add more layers to this conversation going forward. Thank you
Definitely.
so much for your time.
Thank you.